So here we go. We've been talking about clay, and the first project is going to be very open-ended. I'm just going to show you some tricks, and those tricks hopefully will enable you to turn your fun, flat, boring clay into something really cool. And if you want, for this project, you don't necessarily have to decide what you're making right away. If you've never worked with clay before and you just kind of want to go with it, you absolutely can. Art has so many different ways that you can approach it that for this particular project, we don't have to have a set plan. You can just go with the materials. So yesterday we wedged our clay. If you're not quite done wedging your clay, you could do that first. And I have my clay. It has been covered with a damp paper towel. Sometimes it gets moldy, sometimes it gets dry, so you might have to change your paper towel every few days, no big deal. But I'm going to first divide up my clay a little bit. I'm going to take some off of my wedged chunk, and then I'm going to move my tray out of the way, and I'm going to put my clay onto my canvas. And just to help me, sometimes I kind of squish it down. And the first step for this project, since we're making some kind of vessel or container, is to make the surface or the base. So I'm going to squish my clay down a little bit. I'm just using my fingers, and there's a million different ways to do this, so you guys can figure out what works best for you. And then up front, I have rolling pins of all different shapes and sizes, and we're just going to roll this out. And it gets really fun when you roll things out, so try not to have too much fun and do what I did yesterday and make your clay so thin. It was like paper thin. I got too out of control. So have fun, but don't get too out of control. So usually it helps to stand up. You guys can tell that I'm standing up. And I'm rolling one way. And if you guys ever bake or make cookies, sometimes you flip it. Sometimes you roll the other way. Whatever works best for you. I'm just kind of turning my clay. But you just want to get it as even as you can. If it's not perfect, it's okay. And then periodically check your clay. Make sure it's not getting too thin. So I'm going to stop. And I know Julianne's going to ask me, like, well, how thick is too thick or too thin? This is going to be the base of a mug, a bowl, a pencil cup, some kind of container that you make. So I would say maybe not too much thinner than your pinky. Maybe that's like a good measurement, unless you got like a really fat pinky. But that's kind of my impromptu measurement. Look at my pinkies. So maybe that's about a good thickness. And then I'm always trying to make you guys into creative problem solvers. So I didn't give you any kind of circle cutter. I do have all sorts of really cool cookie cutters that I bought just for clay. But instead of saying, hey, here's a circle cookie cutter and you all have to cut it the same size, I want you to be problem solvers. So I need you to find some circles after this. And it's the art room. You can pretty much use any circle you want as long as you wipe it off if you get clay on it. You get to decide how big you want your container to be. Do you want it to be really, really, really wide? Oh no, it's not going to fit. So maybe I have to make my clay a little bit bigger. Maybe you want it to be a little skinnier. Maybe you want it to be really skinny. So find a circle in the room that's the size you want your base to be. And if you don't know what you're making yet, just go with it. If you have an idea, like you want to make a really skinny mug, you might want to start with a skinnier, smaller circle. If you want to make a really large, thick pasta bowl that's really wide, you might want to start with like a bigger circle base. I'm going to go kind of medium, I think, so I'm going to flip upside down my Chobani. I love my yogurt. And up front, there are tools that just look like this. They look like the wooden tools, but they're actually a clay knife. If you slip, you won't hurt yourself. They're kind of like butter knives at home. But of course, like you can stab yourself if you really, really, really fall hard on the knife. But if you use these very carefully, you will be fine. So don't panic that it's a knife. I know some of you are in the cooking program here, so you're good with knives. I'm just kind of holding my Chobani cup. I'm just tracing around it. I'm just trying to get a circle. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just my base. And it sticks. And then you peel your circle off. And then this tends to get kind of floppy like a pancake and it gets squished a little bit. So I put my circle on my tray and I set it aside for later. But now I got my extra clay, I got scraps, I got this random piece that I wedged yesterday. I'm clearing my workspace. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to start to make some coils. So if you want, now that you guys know how to wedge, you only have to wedge your clay when it's a brand new, fresh piece. Whoa. All right, that scared me. Okay. Is it gonna stay? Is it gonna stay? I have enough clay that maybe I can put it there. Okay. Cool. All right. So if you want, you guys can kind of wedge this together, or you can use your hands to squish it. And we're going to make coils. And coils, for those of you who don't know, are the little wormies you used to make with Play-Doh when you were little. And I really struggled making wormies as a child. So I find that if I kind of pre-pinch it, it helps me out. If you don't want to do that, you certainly don't have to. And then once I have a little pinched creature, then I roll with my fingers. I don't know why it helps me if I use two hands and roll out with my finger. And I'm going to try to make a pretty uniform coil about the size of my pinky. Yay! And I used to struggle with this, and it would get really flat, and I would have to pinch it. And it took me years and years and years to be able to make a coil like this. This, like, I got to tell you, I feel like a rock star that I could just roll this nice coil. You guys might not have the same ease at first, but that's okay. It took years and years and years of practice for me to be able to do this. All right, so now I got a coil. Maybe I'll make one more quick. Grab some more clay off my hunk of wedge clay. Squeeze it. Squeeze, 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 squeeze. Make kind of a weirdo hot dog first. Roll it out with my fingers. And sometimes it gets really flat. Some spots get bigger or smaller, so I just kind of pinch as I go. Keep rolling, rolling, rolling. Keep your workspace clear. And when it's about the size or width of your pinky, then I stop. And now I'm going to move my whole tray back. Instead of taking my base off the tray because it's so thin, I tend to keep it on the base and move, or keep it on the tray and move back and forth. And we are going to start to build a vessel using coils. Now I also have something else that's new today. I have baby food. No, just kidding. I reuse these. This is a mixture of clay and water. Does anybody remember what this is called? It's actually called Slip. And it's just clay and water. I had some 6th graders who were working with clay yesterday, and they had a lot of extra scraps, so instead of throwing it away, I just put it in a blender with water. And Slip is really good for attaching 2 pieces of clay together, but it's not enough. So I'm going to start to build up around the edge of my flat circle. And before I can put the coils on, I'm going to scratch or score the surface. I'm going to go like that so you guys can see better. I don't know if you even can see this, but I'm not poking. I don't want to put air bubbles in it, but I'm kind of scratching along the surface of my circle, and I'm making little scratches or scores in my clay. And I do that because if you put 2 really smooth things together, like 2 pieces of clay, they kind of move around a little bit, even with the glue. But if you scratch it and you look at the surface of the clay under the microscope after it's been scored, it looks like this, like my fingers, and it kind of locks together better. So it just keeps it in place even better. And then I do the same thing real quick to my coil. And at first it'll take you a long time. Like today and tomorrow you might only get 2 coils on, but you'll get better and better. Then one finger you stick into the slip and you go, ooh, it's kind of weird. But you get used to it. And then you put lots and lots of slip all around the edge. It's like glue, so you want a lot. Some artists make their own slip just with water, and they kind of make it really wet and make their own slip. I make it for you guys. Either way is fine. And then you very carefully put your coil on. And at first it's going to be a little wacky, and that's okay. And you put it all the way around. And then you press it on a little bit. Boop. And you have the first kind of layer to whatever container you're making. And people usually start to ask me, like, well, do I have to leave it as a coil, or can I smooth it out? And the answer is you can smooth it out. We'll do that after it's completely built. If you like the look of the bumps and the coils, you could totally leave that. Yeah. I cut off a piece at the edge here just because for me, it's a little bit, I guess I want my coil pot to be more even as it goes up. You don't have to do that. I've seen artists before who literally make long coils, and they just kind of wrap them like this. But then usually the edge of their their pot might be at an angle at the top, which is totally fine. I've seen some really cool bowls and cups that are at an angle at the top, and I like that. So either way is fine. Like you could just kind of keep going and going and going like that, you're saying, right? Yeah, so that's another option. And then you just keep making more and more coils, and you score. And I'm using a toothpick. I don't throw these away. I know it's silly, but until they break, I do put everything back at the end of the period. Score. Slip. And you just keep building and building and building. Building and building and building. And you can go like this if you guys want. And go all the way around. And if you want, you can keep going like Javon said. I had a Jovan last year. That's weird. Or you can cut like that, and you can line it up and score it together. Either way is fine. It's totally up to you. If you're not sure, you could try it both ways. Press it on. And I actually like to do this over a few days because you might only get one coil done, and then it's time to clean up, and you're like, oh, darn. But it's actually better because then this can harden up a little bit overnight. So what I do with my clay is I kind of squish it together. Squish. And I wrap my extra clay. This is all the clay I haven't used yet. I wrap that in my wet paper towel lightly. I put it next to my coil pot. And then I will put this in the bag. And I don't wash my hands yet. I know a lot of you will feel funny about the slip. And you're like, I want to wash it. But everything's just going to get dirty again. I wrap everything up. I put my tray in very carefully. If you drop your tray, it's not good. Somebody dropped their clay project yesterday. Clay doesn't like to be dropped. Put it all the way in, tuck the tail under, get the air out, and then what I usually do is I'll put my slip away, I'll put my canvas away. I try to be very careful of the dust, and when I wash my hands, I'll bring my tool with me to the sink, or tools if I use more than one, and I just rinse quick, and water will just be enough to get these off. Rinse your hands off, and as long as you get the big pieces of clay off the tools, I'm a happy camper. We only have 3 sinks, which is a bit of a pain in the neck, so be very careful at the sinks.